Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the DFO Fantasy Show for Monday, October the 6th. This is the first edition of the regular season. We have finally reached the regular season. It starts tomorrow, so fantasy hockey season is officially underway. I personally have 3 more drafts tonight, so hopefully, if you've got any drafts tonight, you're using the Daily Faceoff draft kit, which is 100% free. So head over to dailyfaceoff.com, get our updated rankings, all the latest line combinations. We've been updating those line combinations all throughout the day, so make sure you are checking all that out, obviously 100% free. Just a couple things I want to address before we get started. So the show is going to look a little bit different this year, as I've mentioned in previous episodes. We're going to be coming with an episode every single day, shorter form episodes, just like the one you're watching right now. They'll be released both as a podcast and as a video on the DFO Fantasy and Betting YouTube channel. So if you aren't following the DFO Fantasy and Betting YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe to that now. So we're going to be doing a show every single day. On Mondays, it's going to be like this. We're going to go through what happened the week before, which obviously we don't have anything to talk about today. And then we're going to preview the week that is coming up. So we've got the strength of schedule, some streaming targets for this week. Tuesday, we're going to go around the league, welcome guests from around the league just to talk about whatever's happening across the NHL. So tomorrow, I'm happy to welcome Daily Faceoff's own Stephen Ellis, prospect analyst. He's going to join us, talk about some of the best rookies in fantasy hockey and maybe what to expect out of them this year. Wednesday will be Waiver Wire Wednesday with Beebs and myself. We'll be talking about the best waiver wire pickups. And then on Thursday, Dylan Berthium will join me. And then we will be talking about the weekend. We'll be previewing the weekend, talking about the best streaming options for the upcoming weekend. And then that will close out the show. Also on the DFO Fantasy and Betting YouTube channel, myself and Zach Lang from Oilers Nation, we do a NHL DFS breakdown every single day, Monday through Friday. So make sure you follow for that. And also, Matthew Barnaby will be doing a betting show on the channel as well. So make sure you follow along. Going to be a really fun season at the DFO Fantasy and Betting YouTube channel, as well as at dailyfaceoff.com. Before we get to the strength of schedule and streaming targets for this week, let's dive right in with the news and notes. Not going to bury the lead here. The Oilers and Connor McDavid have agreed to a contract extension. It is only a 2-year contract extension with an AAV of just $12.5 million. That number is probably going to catch some people off guard. I think it makes it pretty clear that Connor McDavid is ready to win a Stanley Cup in the next couple of years. The Oilers weren't done there. It's not been confirmed by the team yet, but according to Elliot Friedman, the Oilers are also expected to sign Jake Walman to a 7-year extension with a $7 million AAV cap hit. Some injury news, both Artemi Panarin and JT Miller are expected to be good to go for the Rangers season opener tomorrow. And then a number of players here. We got Pavel Dorofeyev of the Vegas Golden Knights, Jonas Brodin of the Minnesota Wild, Alex Laferriere of the Kings, Alex Vlasic of the Blackhawks, Jake Walman, who I just mentioned, of the Oilers, Owen Power. All of them are questionable for their respective season openers as of Sunday. So we'll see if any news comes available within the next 24 to 48 hours on them. And then some brutal news out of Winnipeg. Cole Perfetti is expected to miss the first couple of weeks at least of the season with an ankle sprain that he suffered in the Jets preseason finale. He is considered week to week as of right now. So a tough way to start the season there for Cole Perfetti. But without further ado, let's get into week 1 strength of schedule. So how this works, if you've never used the DFO Fantasy Hockey strength of schedule before, we've been doing it for a number of years now, but I've actually changed the way things work a little bit this year. So what this does is it combines the opponents that the team plays. So these are strictly for skaters. So the defensive quality of each team, and then it combines it with how many games they play this week, but then it also factors in how many light night games they have. And then the more light night games, the worse opponents that you play, the higher up the strength of schedule you will go. So obviously we're going to try to target players that play on light nights as best we can so that you can fit them into your lineup. We'll have more breakdowns as we go, but like this week is really weird. Obviously no games today, just 3 games on Tuesday, 4 games on Wednesday, then Thursday and Saturday are jam-packed. For some reason, no games Friday, and then 1 game Sunday. So streaming is very, very difficult this week, but we're going to do our best to navigate it. Make sure you are really finding those players that are going to maximize your games played this week and give you that extra edge to hopefully win your fantasy hockey matchup. So as you can see at the top here, we've got the New York Rangers. So we're going to pull up their line combinations here. They skated this morning. So as I mentioned, JT Miller and Artemi Panarin are going to be in the lineup tomorrow. They boast the best streaming schedule in week 1. They're the only team in the NHL that's opening the season with 4 games in week 1. And they are just one of 3 teams that have 2 light night games. So they are the clear favorites among streamers this week. The problem is you don't really have many great streaming options on this team. Will Cooley, who's expected to start the season on the top line with JT Miller and Mika Zibanejad, is a great option. He's already 43% rostered, though. He's likely rostered in every banger league format. However, I think he's still a pretty viable option in standard formats. Obviously, skating on a line with Miller and Zibanejad is a good spot to have. After Miller was acquired last year from Vancouver, Cooley saw extended time on that line with Miller and Zibanejad, and that was a trio that produced 3.7 goals for per 60 and 31.1 scoring chances for per 60, both really strong offensive rates. And then Cooley closed out the year with 18 points in his final 28 games. That is a 53-point pace. So really laid a strong foundation towards the end of last season for what he could potentially do this year. And starting on that line, it puts him in a good spot to kind of pick up right where he left off. Obviously, if you're in a banger league format and he's somehow still available, he's obviously an instant add. He'll be a guy that you can hold on to for the entire season. He piled up 300 plus hits last season while averaging just over 15 minutes a night. And that's a number that I expect to increase this year. Wouldn't be surprised if he's 16, 17, maybe even 18 minutes a night tonight playing on that top line with Miller and Zibanejad. So Will Cooley, 43% rostered. He's obviously up there, but probably available still in a lot of standard formats. Alexis Lafreniere is 28% owned. He's probably my favorite target this week. He bounced around the Rangers lineup during the preseason, but ultimately landed back on a line with Panarin and with Trocheck, and that's a trio that he spent over 70% of his 5v5 ice time with last year. That line was also just phenomenal at 5v5. They had 3.3 goals for per 60, 3.1 expected goals for per 60, but Lafreniere's individual production was still pretty modest. It was a disappointing year after a pretty good 2024 season. So as a result, he's still available in over 70% of leagues. He's a really good streaming candidate this week to start the year. And I think both Cooley and Lafreniere have profiles of high upside players that could be week one streamers that turn into longer term holds if they get off to a nice start. And obviously the schedule lines up nicely for them to do so. Just a couple other names to mention. It looks like Connor Sheary, he was on a PTO with the Rangers. It looks like he's going to make the team out of camp. He'll be on the third line. And the second power play unit to start the season. So if you're really desperate to get a range in your lineup and Cooley and Lafreniere aren't available, Connor Sheary is probably the next most viable candidate for the Rangers. So that is pretty much all you get from the New York Rangers. So we'll pull back the strength of schedule here and take a look at our second team. So the Washington Capitals have the second best strength of schedule this week. They're, again, one of just 3 teams with 2 late night games. They have the second schedule overall. They have one game. They're one of 2 teams playing on Sundays. They face the Rangers to close out the week. So obviously, trying to get the Rangers, trying to get the Capitals in your lineup as best you can this week is going to help you in the long run. Hopefully by the end of the week, that last game, they can push you over the top. So we'll pull up the Washington Capitals line combinations here. And, throughout the preseason, they were really mixing things up with what they had, really done well with last season, but then they ended up kind of just going right back to how everything looked last year. That was Ovechkin, Strome, and Protas. That was McMichael, Dubois, and Wilson in the top 6. And that top 6 had a lot of success last year, so I'm not really surprised that they've gone back to that. So the Capitals, they have, as I mentioned, the second best streaming schedule this week, one of only 3 teams with 2 late night games. And like the Rangers, though, they don't really have a lot of great streaming options unless in shallower leagues you've got Pierre-Luc Dubois available or Protas available to you. Dubois at 57% rostered already, Protas at 62%. So pretty unlikely, but if you're listening and they're still available in your leagues, it's definitely worth taking a look. If they aren't available, the next 2 best options are Connor McMichael at 27% rostered. McMichael could be the top streaming option for week 1 if he could just recapture what he did in the early portion of last season. He opened last year with 19 points, 12 goals, 7 assists in his first 16 games. He was one of the hottest early season fantasy hockey pickups. He cooled off afterwards. He had just 38 points in his final 66 games. That was a 47-point pace. And that kind of like 20 goal, 30 assist baseline is kind of what I'm expecting as a more realistic line for McMichael this year. I don't think he's going to get off to that ridiculous start that he did, but it's still a pretty good, streaming option throughout the course of the season. Now he's reunited with Dubois and Tom Wilson after spending much of the preseason in the middle. And I think on that line, McMichael is positioned for another strong start to the year. That was a trio that produced an absolute elite 4.1 goals for per 60 and 3.2 expected goals for per 60 across nearly 400 5v5 minutes. So They were really, really good together last year. I expect them to be pretty strong again to start this year. And again, with your options so limited, McMichael is easily one of the best options to open the season. If he's unavailable in your league, Ryan Leonard is probably the next best option at 11%. Now, these two are more format dependent. McMichael's a guy that I would pick up in more standard formats, but I would actually probably lean towards Leonard in banger leagues. He offers 8.3 hits per 60 last year in a short amount of time between the regular season and playoffs. After turning pro, following his sophomore year at Boston College, where he was great. He had 30 goals, 49 points in 37 games. He managed to score just 1 goal and 1 assist across 17 regular season and playoff games with the Capitals. But he's coming off a strong preseason where he had 2 goals and an assist in 3 games. Hopefully he can bring some of that into the regular season. As I mentioned, he's got some sneaky value in banger leagues. He will throw the body around. He's kind of a relentless winger. So he'll be hitting everything in sight. And in banger leagues, I think Leonard's actually probably one of the best streaming candidates this week. Obviously, if Will Cooley is unavailable, as I imagine he probably is. Let's bring back the strength of schedule now, where there's only one other team with 2 late night games this week, and that's the LA Kings. You see them down there at 9th. And what's kind of interesting about the Kings is, yes, they got 2 late night games. They're both early in the week, so they make a really nice short-term ad. You can pick them up and then just dump them. The problem with it is both their matchups are quite difficult. They open the season at home against the Avalanche, and then they travel to Vegas for game number 2. So not really the ideal streaming schedule, but again, our options are extremely limited. I think one thing that I want to caution you about before we get into the LA Kings here is if you drafted a team and you don't have an obvious drop, it's really not worth it probably this week in week 1 to make room on your roster just to make room on your roster. If you've got somebody that you can add to IR and you've got a hole, let's use that as a streaming spot. But don't drop somebody that you took in the last round that you really like that has high upside to just add one of these guys. The extra 2 games that you might get this week, probably not worth it in the long run, but it's just week 1. Be a little bit more cautious with streamers. But again, if you've got room or if you've got something that you don't feel great about, then certainly move to these guys. So we've already talked about the Rangers. We've already talked about the Capitals. Let's talk about the LA Kings as we bring up their line combinations here. And if you've listened to the show throughout the preseason, you've probably heard me mention Andrei Kuzmenko's name multiple times. He's 19% rostered, and I've mentioned him as a strong streaming candidate. I didn't really think he was somebody that I was going to pick up with my last round pick, but I do think that he is going to be a strong streamer throughout the year, and we're going to get a chance to test that theory right off the bat. We've talked about him a lot already, and he obviously finished last year just red hot. He had 17 points in his final 15 regular season games, and then he had 6 points in 6 playoff contests as well. So he was just absolutely splendid for the Kings down the stretch. Obviously, we don't expect him to sustain the 20.5 shooting percentage that he carried during that stretch, but he'll once again be on a line with Kopitar and Kempe. He'll once again be on power play 1 to start the season. So it sets Kuzmenko up to have a nice start, kind of pick up right where he left off. And as far as streaming candidates go early in the week, he's as good as they get, in my opinion. The next name I'll talk about here is Alex Laferriere, who's only 13% rostered. Now, Laferriere is dealing with a minor injury right now. As I mentioned in the news and notes, he is questionable for the season opener. So make sure he's going to play tomorrow before you waste a pickup. We just talked about not wanting to waste pickups. It'll be especially wasteful if he doesn't play. But if he's active, he's expected to rejoin a line with Quinton Byfield and Kevin Fiala. We'll also see in Power Play 2 deployment. The Byfield Fiala Laferriere trio, last year posted a 3.5 goals for per 60 and had a 76.9 goals for percentage. They just absolutely dominated the opposition at 5v5, and it really allowed Laferriere to have a nice year. He closed out the season pretty strong as well. He had 10 points in his final 14 games. He also averaged 3.0 shots and 1.6 hits per game during that stretch. So if he's healthy, I think he's got some standard league appeal in deeper leagues. He's also got some sneaky banger league appeal. He's got a really solid floor with that shot volume and that hit volume. And obviously brings some upside with how good that line is. Now, let's go back to the strength of schedule. We've got just a couple other teams to talk about. Obviously, we've already run through all of the teams that have 2 late night games. So the rest of these players we're going to talk about are 1-game streams. Now, if you don't feel comfortable dropping people for our players for 1 game, I don't blame you at all. I don't think that any of these names really jump off the board as guys that you absolutely must pick up right now. But it is worth mentioning that some of these, basically all these players I'm going to mention, have potential long-term upside. So I think that they are worthwhile to pick up for that one game if you've got the room, and see how this week goes. And they do have potential to be long-term holds. I think the most intriguing pickups to start the week obviously come from the Florida Panthers. They have an absolutely great matchup to start the season against the Blackhawks. And then with Alexander Barkov out for the year, Anton Lundell is a guy that I talked about during the preseason process after the Barkov injury that could really step into a bigger role this year. He's only 23% rostered, so I think he could really emerge as a long-term asset. I want to pick him up if he's available in my league. You get to see that one late night game action right away, see what he looks like in your lineup. Hopefully, get started on the right foot. After missing some preseason time, he was back at practice today, and he's expected to open the season on a line with Sam Reinhart. So they are shuffling that top six a little bit. It's going to be Lundell, Reinhart, and Eetu Luostarinen. Plus, Lundell is expected to open with some power play 2-time as well. Speaking of Luostarinen, he's just 1% roster, so he'll be available in your leagues. He should see an expanded role, obviously, with the injuries now in Florida. No Tkachuk, no Barkov. I think the offensive ceiling is somewhat limited, but he does average 2.3 hits per game last year. So there is some sneaky banger league upside, I think, here for Luostarinen. Again, not a guy that I'm dropping anybody of substance for, but if you have a spot and you want to add a couple hits and potentially some offense to start the week and start the season, I think Luostarinen is okay. And if you want to look at Mackie Samoskevich, he's a deeper dart throw in deep leagues, but he's currently outside the top six on power play 2 as well. It's a favorable matchup, but I don't think it's really worth it. And then these are some quick other names that could have long-term value if they get off to a hot start. By just an order of roster percentage, Ryan Donato of the Blackhawks, he's center, left wing, right wing eligible. Obviously a tough matchup against the Panthers to start, but we saw what he could do last year. I think he's worthwhile to pick up early and see if he can just continue what was a ridiculous pace last year. He's expected to open the season on a line with Connor Bedard, which is a pretty good spot. Ivan Barbashev, I think, is one of the most interesting names. He's 27% rostered for the Vegas Golden Knights right now. He's going to start the season on a line with Eichel and Mitch Marner. If you've listened to the show in the last month, we've talked about him a couple times. He had a ridiculous start to last year, and I think he could offer similar value this year. Evgeny Malkin, obviously not the player he used to be, but still going to be power play 1 in the top 6 in Pittsburgh. Someone's got to score there. He's 21% rostered. They've got one late night game this week. Matt Coronado is a guy that I really liked as a late draft pick this year. He's still only 19% rostered. I think he's got legit 30-30 upside this year, maybe 35-35 upside if everything goes well. Really like Coronado, still available in over 80% of leagues. Matias Maccelli, on the top line, off the top line, on the top line, off the top line, back on the top line this morning. Max Domi back in the middle on the third line. So it looks like Maccelli's going to open the year on the top line with Matthews and Nyes. I think, not going to offer a lot of goal scoring upside, but can definitely chip in with a lot of helpers this season. Frankie Nazar of the Blackhawks, I've mentioned some hesitation around him just with what he did away from Connor Bedard last year, but had a really nice preseason. I think that he's a worthwhile young player to pick up and see if he's ready to take that next step. Trent Frederick, 11% owned for the Edmonton Oilers. We talked about him a lot in the last month. Obviously, he's going to start the season on a line with McDavid and Draisaitl. Really no better spot to be playing in the NHL. So I think especially in banger leagues, he's a great pickup. Still available in a lot of leagues. I think that he could certainly hit the ground running playing with those two. And then just 3 sub 10% names. We've got Zach Bolduc playing in the top 6 in Montreal at 9% rostered. Billy Koivunen, 3% rostered for the Penguins, is going to open the season on a line with Sidney Crosby because Brian Rust is hurt. And then Bobby McMahon of the Maple Leafs, 3% rostered. He's going to be in the top 6 skating with Tavares and Nylander. So that's it. That is going to do it for the first strength of schedule and streaming targets episode of the season. We're going to be doing these every single Monday morning, bringing them to you both via podcast and on the DFO Fantasy and Betting YouTube channel. Please hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Tune in tomorrow morning when we chat with Steven Ellis about some of the best rookies there's a massive rookie crop this year, and which ones are going to be the best for your fantasy team, which ones might still be available on the wire. And he's also releasing his Calder Trophy favorites tomorrow. So we're going to talk a little bit about some wagers you can lay on the Calder Trophy. So be sure to tune in tomorrow. Thanks for watching this video. If you want more great fantasy hockey and betting content from myself, Carter Hutton, Matthew Barnaby, and the rest of the DFO analysts, make sure you subscribe to the DFO Fantasy and Betting YouTube channel today and never miss a minute.